Welcome back to the G Files and welcome back to the grind, everybody. With week one in the books, we're going to go through and look and see how each team fared. Start out first with Georgia State. Georgia State took on Iowa State. They pulled out the upset, 35-31. Georgia State had 11 first downs, 386 total offensive yards, 126 rushing yards, and 260 passing yards. Their quarterback, Brown, went 21-31, 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions for 260 yards. Running back had a good game as well with 20 attempts for 114 yards, 5.7 average, and 2 touchdowns. Looks like they spread the ball out very well with 7 different receivers receiving the ball, with Thrash leading the charge with 57 yards catching. Crawford led Georgia State with 4 tackles and 4 solo tackles. They had, looks like, 1 interception. Florida Atlantic was also able to get a victory this week over University of North Carolina. They won 35-28 with 18 first downs to North Carolina's 12. 359 total offensive yards. Or, I'm sorry, my bad. Florida Atlantic had 12 first downs. 370 total offensive yards, 167 rushing yards, and 203 passing yards. FAU had 2 turnovers, 1 fumble lost, and they were intercepted once. They were also able to get a turnover by intercepting North Carolina. FAU's quarterback went 13-15 for 203 yards and 2 touchdowns and interception. Emmons led the rushing game, Tronte led the rushing game with 7 attempts for 65 yards, 1 touchdown. In receiving, it was Emmons who also led the receiving yards with 3 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown. And on defense was led by Ross, who had 10 tackles, 10 solo tackles, and 2 tackles for losses. Joyner got the only sack, and then Mungan was able to get the 1 interception. Appalachian State was not able to pull out the upset against Cincinnati, losing 24-23 in a close game. Appalachian State had 358 total offensive yards and Cincy's 278. They had 203 rushing yards and only 155 passing yards. They had 3 turnovers, 1 fumble loss, and 2 interceptions. Their quarterback went 17-28 for 155 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. That's a quarterback. Yep. He also led the team in rushing with 17 attempts, 101 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Top receiver was Williams with 4 receptions and 45 yards. And leading the defense was Jackson with 7 tackles, 7 solo tackles. They had a total of, looks like, 3 sacks, Spurton with 2 and Hampton with 1. And no interceptions. And good old Alabama put a whooping on South Alabama, 45-28. South Alabama did get 469 total offensive yards with 119 rushing and 350 passing. But Alabama had 180 rushing and 232 passing. South Alabama had 5 turnovers. They lost 3 fumbles and then were intercepted twice. Alabama had none. Passing leaders for USA was Trotter at 21 attempts, or 21 completions on 32 attempts, 290 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. Leading rusher was also Trotter with 11 attempts and 42 yards with a touchdown. Leading receiver was Tolbert with 6 receptions for 195 yards and no touchdowns. And on defense, leading defender was Henderson with 10 tackles, 10 solo tackles, no tackles for losses. Brooks got the only sack. Wisconsin destroyed Troy 44-13. Troy had 365 yards of total offense and Wisconsin had 432 yards of total offense. Troy with 40 rushing yards and 325 passing to Wisconsin's 224 rushing and 208 passing. Troy had 3 turnovers off of 3 interceptions. Wisconsin had none. Leading the Trojans in passing was Toole, 12 completions off 26 attempts, 183 yards and a touchdown. He also had 2 interceptions. Right behind him was Watson, who looks like he shared the ball quite a bit with Toole. Was 6 completions off 15 attempts, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Rushing, Bud Smith led with 17 rushes for 63 yards, no touchdowns. Leading receiver was Rogers with 7 receptions for 155 yards and a touchdown. Defensively, Pettis led the team defensively with 11 tackles, 11 solo tackles, no tackles for losses. They had no sacks and no interceptions. East Carolina pulled it off against Ohio State. That game is actually on the channel as well as the FAU game will be up as soon as I get it, get it edited and posted up. But anyway, ECU won 34-17 over Ohio State. They had 16 first downs, 446 total offensive yards to Ohio State's 230, 117 rushing yards and 329 passing yards. They threw 1 interception, and Ohio State threw 1 interception. Ehlers, the lethal lefty is what I call him now, had 18 completions for 18 completions on 28 attempts, 329 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Mitchell had 16 rushing attempts for 170 yards and 3 touchdowns. Leading the team in receiving was Snead with 4 receptions for 135 yards and a touchdown. And leading the team on defense was Wilson with 6 tackles, 6 solo tackles, no tackles for losses. D'Abreu had 1 sack, and Hickman had the only interception. Louisiana took Texas A&M to the woodshed. It looks like they had beat them 34-3. Had 453 total offensive yards to A&M's 275, 61 rushing yards and 392 passing yards. Had 0 turnovers. A&M had 2. Lewis led the Raging Cajuns with 29 completions on 38 attempts, 392 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Leading rusher was Smith with 14 attempts for 71 yards. Leading receiver was Lacey with 4 receptions for 112 yards and a touchdown. And on defense, Butler was the leading tackler with 8 tackles, 8 solo tackles, 0 tackles for losses. Hill got 2 sacks in that game, and Moncrief had 1 sack in that game. The 1 interception was caught by Garner, who returned it for 16 yards. ULM pulled out a tight one against Oklahoma, 23-20. 290 yards of total offense for ULM. Oklahoma had 306. 64 rushing yards and 226 passing yards. ULM had 0 turnovers to Oklahoma's 1. Hunt went 14 of 25 for 216 yards and a touchdown. Johnson went 15 for 35 yards, no touchdowns. Leading receiver was Hodo with 3 receptions for 64 yards, no touchdowns. Defensively was led by Webster with 6 tackles, 6 solo tackles, and 2 tackles for losses. Harris netted himself 2 sacks, and Sweeney netted himself an interception. UAB destroyed Notre Dame 42-0 with 445 total offensive yards. Notre Dame's abysmal 106 total offensive yards. They held Notre Dame to only 5 rushing yards. UAB themselves had 150 rushing yards and 295 passing yards. No turnovers to Notre Dame's 2. Hopkins went 27 of 29 for 293 yards and 3 touchdowns. Leading rusher was Brown Jr. for 7 attempts for 76 yards and a touchdown. Leading receivers was Davis for 8 receptions for 98 yards, no touchdowns. Leading defense was Turner with 4 tackles, 4 solo tackles, 1 tackle for a loss. Wilder got 2 sacks in that game. Thomas had 1. Turner had 1. Interceptions were made by McWilliams and Key. Arkansas State put up a good fight against Clemson, losing 48-20. They had 307 total offensive yards, 81 rushing yards, and 226 passing yards. They had 2 turnovers off of 2 fumbles. Hatcher went 15-28 for 226 yards and no touchdowns. Murray had 16 attempts for 63 yards and a touchdown. Leading receiver was Foreman with 3 receptions for 108 yards. No touchdowns. Leading the defense was Hassler with 12 tackles, 5 of them solo tackles, 7 assisted tackles, 2 tackles for losses. He even got a sack. And that looks like that's all the sacks. Okay. Texas State edged it out against Oregon 29-22. They had 309 total offensive yards with 89 rushing yards, 220 passing yards. They had 2 turnovers, 1 fumble lost, and 1 interception. McBride went 15-29 for 220 yards and 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. McBride also led the team in rushing with 9 attempts for 40 yards and a touchdown. Receiving was led by Barbie with 5 receptions for 103 yards and a touchdown. And defense was led by Coleman with 9 tackles, 9 solo tackles, and 4 tackles for losses. Sutton got him a sack. Patton got a sack. Coastal Carolina got the upset over Georgia, 21-28. They had 366 total offensive yards, 193 rushing yards, and 173 passing yards. They had 0 turnovers. McCall went 18-24 for 173 yards and 4 touchdowns. McCall led the team in rushing with 14 attempts and 93 yards. Leading receiver was Likely with 5 receptions for 57 yards and 3 touchdowns. And leading defensive tackler was Gallagher with 4 tackles, 4 solo tackles, 1 tackle for loss. And it looks like no sacks, no interceptions, no forced fumbles. And that'll do it for the week 1 update. We're going to try to get more videos and stuff up for you guys as far as the games go, and as soon as I can, I will get my game against FAU up for you guys as well. If you like the content, like, subscribe, comment, and as always, take care and good night.